Hello and welcome to another Excel at Excel video. Today we are going to be looking at charts and graphs in Excel. So here we have the spreadsheet from before. On this spreadsheet we've got the plant names and the costs. What happens if we wanted to plot these on a bar graph so we can clearly see how much each plant costs, and we can maybe print this off. Now, to do this, we first need to select the data. Now, we want to select the plant names and we want to select the costs. So the way to do this is move your cursor to A3. Select all of them by clicking and dragging down to A7. Press Control. Now, go to C3 and select all of those cells. Once you've done this, go up the top to Insert. Go Insert. Now there's two ways you could do this. Recommended charts will show you a list of charts that you could use, or you could select your charts from here. They're the bar charts, line charts, bar charts, or graphs. I'm going to click Recommended. So here they'll show us a range of different ones we could choose. The first one is called a clustered column. This is just a bar graph. As you can see, we've got the prices along the side and the plant names across the bottom. You notice up the top it says chart title. We can replace this later. You could also use a pie graph, but this doesn't really work. So no, we won't choose this one. This is like the bar graph, except for the fact they've just switched the axes. So for this one, we'll just simply choose the column chart or the bar graph. Click OK. Now, the chart comes out looking pretty standard. So the first thing you need to do is move your cursor over chart title. Double click. And you'll notice that it opens up like this. Now we can select it and write in here our title. Done. Now, that's great and everything, but it looks slightly boring. Now, there's multiple ways that we can change the colours. Up the top, you can select different looks. Now, let's change some of the colours. Beautiful. So now, you get a lovely, bright-looking chart, which we can print off or display. But it's also good to quickly analyse the information. There's all other sorts of things we can do to charts as well. We can add certain elements to charts. For instance, actually, titles. For instance, we can say here, cost. And down the bottom, plant. That's one thing. We could add in a range of other stuff. For this chart, we don't really want to do any of that. That's probably finished. We can create a new worksheet on the same document just by pressing the bottom. And we get a new thing. The other one's accessible down the bottom just by clicking there. But now, here, let's make a pretend temperatures during the day. Up the top, we'll give it a title. We'll call this time. And this column, temperature. Beautiful. Now, we want the time to be 1 o'clock in the morning, this will be. So we go up here, and we go down, and we can change the format to time. 12 a.m. Notice how it's also given it a date. We can just remove that. Now, let's drag it down, and we can automatically fill in a day. Okay, now, let's make it a nice day. Let's say that at about 10 degrees. Lovely. So, this is a sort of realistic temperatures. Okay, now, because this data shows the effects of the data over a period of time, we should display this data using a line graph. So select everything, insert, and now you can either do recommended charts, and you'll see they've got a lovely line graph. This is called a scatter graph, which is very similar but different. Or we could use a bar graph, but we don't really want to use a bar graph, so we can just put in a line graph. Lovely. Let's make it a bit bigger. So that temperature. Now, we can label our axes again. Beautiful. Now, we can also make it a bit fancy, dress it up a bit. Let's change it so it looks like that. Lovely. Great. Now, so the next thing we could do is add all these other elements in. Now,
there are many different options we can add to our graph. To add these options, we need to click on the graph, down here where the actual data is, and then click plus. Here are a range of different options, including grid lines, legends, trend line, and other data labels and tables and other. Now, one of these options is the trend line. For instance, here it shows the averages of the temperatures increases as we go through the data. This is a simple trend line, and there are many more complicated ways we can do to the trend lines. To adjust the trend line option, we can click the arrow next to it, which there are for all of the additional elements, and then you can click one of these options in your option. You can feel free to play with these options on your own. The only one of interest that I'll bring up now is what's called the moving average. Moving average is that darker line there is the moving average. The moving average would have been very much popularized by this COVID-19 outbreak. So when we've got all these data of how many new cases there are every day, it's quite almost spiky, and there's a few changes almost. So moving average allows you to smooth out this data. So moving average simply says we're going to take the last, in this case, 2 pieces of data, as we can see from period 2, and find the average, and then plot it, and then we'll keep on doing that for all the data. We can do this for for multiple periods, and we'll eventually get flatter. It also begins to move to the right, because the data here at the end, where it's finding the average, is of the past 4 things, which includes this one piece of data. Therefore, it still can find an average. But the trend lines, other than the moving average, becomes especially more relevant when you look at other types of data. So, I just made this data that shows the relationship between the length of a car service and the amount of breakdowns it has. As you can see, this data looks very difficult to manage in its raw form. So we can put it into a scatter plot, which just uses points. Just go here to scatter, and select the one with only points. Now, we can see that there's a sort of line that the data take, but it's still slightly unclear as there are. So what we can do is add a trend line. This is where the trend line really shines. As you can see here, the trend line clearly shows us the average, how the data is moving. For instance, down here, if you have a 6-hour service, you will have considerably less breakdowns than some person who gives only a 30-minute service.